Golden rain trees lure some to New Harmony. Visitors in all seasons note the town's concern for cultural pursuits. They also note the town's interest in historic preservation. Many who see New Harmony's landmarks and artifacts wonder about the Harmonists and Owenites who lived here in the early 19th century. Some become interested in further investigation of the town's history to learn why New Harmony is significant. The first settlers were the members of the Harmony Society, known as the Rappites, as their leader was George Rapp. The Harmony Society's roots were in the German province of Württemberg. In this village, Iptingen, lived George Rapp. He lived in this house, where he read the works of certain German philosophers and theologians. Here he also read his Bible and preached. His interpretation of passages in the book of Revelation, in the light of great events of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, particularly those involving Napoleon, led him to believe that Christ would return to earth soon. Rapp persuaded growing numbers who came from nearby villages to hear him preach that they should prepare themselves collectively to become the bride of Christ. These villagers chose to emulate the simple and mutually protective lifestyle of the earliest Christians. George Rapp and his followers often ignored the local church practices and requirements. When these separatists from the established Lutheran Church grew in numbers and became more organized, the government of Württemberg restricted their religious freedom. Some who found conditions intolerable moved to Russia and Hungary. Others, under the leadership of Father Rapp, heeded what they considered a divine call to flee the imminent destruction of Europe and emigrate to America, where they believed Christ was about to establish his kingdom. Father Rapp bought land 25 miles from Pittsburgh for his faithful. Harmony, the Pennsylvania settlement that housed over 450 persons in 1805, was built on cleared land along a small stream. Here they organized themselves into the Harmony Society and signed over all their possessions to it. This communal situation was biblically inspired. George Rapp's adopted son, Frederick, was chosen business manager. At Harmony, most Rappites began, with scriptural encouragement, to lead celibate lives, even the married ones. This meant fewer children needing care and more time for work. Hard work, frugal consumption habits, and skilled management of agricultural and manufacturing enterprises brought economic prosperity. But surplus products, particularly woolen goods and whiskey, had to be hauled more than 12 miles to the Ohio River for water transportation to markets. The Harmonists felt a need for more convenient transportation facilities, as well as for land of greater fertility to support more immigrants from Württemberg. They claimed their land and climate unsuitable for raising grapes for winemaking, an occupation many of them had followed in Germany. In 1814, George Rapp selected a new location on the banks of the Wabash in Indiana Territory, which they also named Harmony. Harmony, Pennsylvania, was sold. By 1816, 20,000 acres of land had been acquired and 2,000 acres of wilderness had been cleared by the Harmonists to be planted in corn, wheat, rye, vineyards, and orchards. The first dwellings were constructed of logs. Then a sawmill provided lumber for houses of frame construction. The tree-bordered streets and neatly fenced lots planted in flowers and vegetables gave the town a garden-like appearance, unusual for the backwoods. The first public building was a church of frame construction. Fever drained the settlers of energy, and many of them died. Their graves were unmarked, as it was believed the millennium, with Christ's return to earth, would end a short period of interment. Nevertheless, new immigrants from Württemberg brought the community's population to about 800 within a few years. Permanent brick buildings of the Harmonists included a two-story mansion for Father Rapp and his family. Unmarried adults were housed in several large dormitories. An early building was a large granary of stone and brick. Industries included a water-powered flour mill, a steam-powered cloth factory, distilleries, and a brewery. Harmonist stores supplied other pioneer German settlers in southwestern Indiana and settlers near Albion, Illinois. Such stores were located at Harmony and Vincennes, Indiana, and Shawneetown, Illinois. Products of high-quality woolen, cotton, linen, and leather goods, grain, beef, pork, whiskey, beer, and wine were sold by agents in Louisville, St. Louis, and Pittsburgh. Their most prosperous trade was with New Orleans by flatboat. Frederick Rapp was a delegate to Indiana's first Constitutional Convention in 1816, where he voted against slavery and compulsory military service. A few years later, he was one of the commissioners who selected the site for the permanent capital of the new state, the site upon which grew the city of Indianapolis. In 1822, the Harmony Society built a new brick church according to specifications revealed to Father Rapp in his dreams. The older frame church had been uncomfortably hot in the summertime when filled with the entire community. Above the main entrance of the new church, Frederick Rapp carved a rose that was inspired by a passage from the book of Micah. In the center of a public garden was a labyrinth that was similar to this one. The difficulty of reaching the center sanctuary symbolized the difficulty of getting to the inner kernel of life. Life in Rappite Harmony was more than work and worship. George Rapp wrote in his diary on April 12, 1823,
"In the evening, around 6, music began to play in the upper story of number 2, and all people gathered there uncalled, and I was very cheerful and happy, for the oldest men and women sat in the hall to the right and left, and there was discussion about the beginning of the harmony, and the young people sang several songs from the Harmony songbook."
Musical instruction was available free to those who wished it. There was a weekly concert. The public library of the Harmonists was one of the largest in the state at that time. The Harmonist Press printed a hymnal, which included selections written by members of the society. Also, a book by George Rapp was published in both German and English versions. The congregation eagerly sought to advance the spirit, soul, mind, and body, all in harmony. With the support of an economy that was balanced by agriculture, industry, and trade, with the bonds of a common language, culture, religion, and leadership, the Harmony Society enjoyed in Indiana its period of greatest unity and harmony. There was disharmony, however, with some of the Indiana neighbors, particularly those who resented the Harmonists' material successes, the closed nature of their society, their intolerance of drunkenness, their price for grinding corn, and their avoidance of state-required militia duty by paying fines. For reasons not entirely clear, Father Rapp, after 10 years in Indiana, decided to move his congregation back to Pennsylvania. There, adequate markets were closer, and the accumulated capital could be invested with the prospect of greater returns. Frederick selected the new location called Economy. Harmony, Indiana was advertised for sale. With the assistance of Richard Flower of Albion, Illinois, it was sold to Robert Owen, a wealthy industrialist and social reformer of New Lanark, Scotland, who wanted to start a socialist experiment of his own. The first group of Harmonists, before departing, left an inscription under the stair of Community House number 2. The last of several groups left a year later on the Society's own steamboat. At Economy, the Society experienced even greater economic prosperity. The emphasis of their economic activities was directed toward manufacturing and finance. A company they organized to market the oil that was discovered on their property was sold to John D. Rockefeller. A railroad they acquired was later sold to Cornelius Vanderbilt. There were investments in real estate at nearby Beaver Falls, where they assisted in the development of Geneva College. In this house, in 1847, shortly before his 90th birthday, George Rapp died, still believing that he had been divinely appointed to present the Harmony Society to Christ in person. The society continued to survive with decreasing numbers until the early part of the 20th century. It was one of the most prosperous communitarian groups in 19th century United States. Father Rapp's community had provided Robert Owen with physical facilities for his utopian quest at New Harmony, Indiana. Robert Owen left his native Wales at the age of 10. He was manager of a textile mill in Manchester, England at 20, and was both manager and principal owner of the largest textile mill in Great Britain by the time he was 30. This mill was at New Lanark, Scotland, where during the next 23 years, Owen became wealthy, sired a family of 7 children, and turned his attention toward social reform.
For the creation of happiness for the human race, 2 things have always been required. Firstly, a really good character for all, from birth to death. Secondly, a superfluity of wealth at all time for all.
Because Owen believed that no one could form his own character, as man is essentially the creature of the circumstances which surround him, he emphasized educational processes. He became famous in Europe for his school for children of the New Lanark factory workers. Many of his educational innovations are commonplace today. Owen did not see around him a superfluity of real wealth, which he deemed necessary for the happiness of mankind. He contended that private ownership of property led to an unequal distribution of wealth, especially when mechanical technology was applied to the factory system. His proposed solution to the problem was the establishment of villages of unity and mutual cooperation, where 500 to 1,500 people would, through common labor and programs of character building, remold their lives and prosper. He hoped by the successful example of such communities to extend his ideas to society at large. Although Owen at first gained respect and support in high places, he soon became unpopular when he denounced the institutions of the family and the churches as they were then organized. Consequently, he turned to what he considered a freer environment in America. The opportunity to buy Harmony, Indiana, came at an appropriate moment. Leaving the mills to the management of his 23-year-old son, Robert Dale, and taking William, his second son, with him, Robert Owen left for America in the fall of 1824. The Owens visited George Rapp at Economy, Pennsylvania. Then at Harmony, Indiana, Frederick Rapp assisted in completing the sale on January 2nd, 1825. Owen considered this initial investment of about $150,000 a bargain. Owen returned east, where he addressed 2 joint sessions of Congress. In Washington, he also showed a model of the buildings he proposed to erect later at New Harmony. He encouraged persons from Washington and elsewhere who were in sympathy with his ideas to join the new community. Taking care of the numbers who responded immediately was son William's burdensome responsibility. Robert Owen returned to New Harmony in April 1825. In the hall, the former church, he told the new inhabitants of his plans for them. A preliminary society was established with government by a 7-member committee. One of the 4 members appointed by Owen was 23-year-old William, who exerted a strong influence while his father returned to Europe for 6 months. During this time, there were weekly community meetings, lectures, concerts, and dances. An enthusiastic supporter of the preliminary society was William Pelham, who wrote,
"I am at length free, my body is at my own command, and I enjoy mental liberty. I can speak my sentiments without fear of any bad consequences, and others do the same. Here are no political or religious quarrels, though there is a great diversity of opinion in matters of religion. Each one says what he thinks, and mutual respect for the sentiments of each other seems to pervade all our intercourse. You can hardly expect that in the heterogeneous population hastily collected here, there should be no idlers, no speculators, etc. This preliminary society cannot be considered as a fair sample of the perfect community in view, because it consists of persons differing much from each other in their tempers and inclinations, whereas the new community will consist of select characters actuated by feelings of common interest.
The preliminary society had problems of economic subsistence. Production and services were inadequate in certain areas, as those who overflowed the community housing were not carefully screened. Nevertheless, most persons assumed that Robert Owen would remedy the situation upon his return. After Owen returned to the United States in November 1825, accompanied by his eldest son, Robert Dale, he stopped in eastern cities to speak, meet influential persons, and recruit persons with skills needed at New Harmony. A distinguished group of scientists and educators was headed by William McClure, a wealthy Scotsman who had established a school in Philadelphia based upon the principles of Pestalozzi, and became known as the father of American geology. He became a partner with Owen in the New Harmony experiment by investing $150,000 plus his large library. Owen chose McClure to head the education department. Famous teachers in that department were Joseph Neef, who had been associated with Pestalozzi, William Fique-Paul de Roussemont, who had taught in Neef's Philadelphia school, and Madame Marie de Clos-Fratasia, who also had a school in Philadelphia and who encouraged McClure to join Robert Owen. McClure ordered constructed in Pittsburgh the keel boat to bring Robert Dale Owen, de Roussemont, Madame Fratasia, himself, and other learned persons down the Ohio River to Mount Vernon, Indiana. Several passengers wrote accounts of the journey, which was halted when the boat became stuck in December ice for 4 weeks. Lesueur, a French naturalist and artist, made these sketches along the route, as well as other sketches used in this film. Robert Owen, traveling overland, arrived in New Harmony ahead of the passengers to declare that this boat held more learning than was ever before contained in a boat. Consequently, the philanthropist became commonly known as the boatload of knowledge. Almost immediately upon his return in mid-January of 1826, Robert Owen proposed that the preliminary society be replaced by a permanent one based upon the community of property. A constitution provided for a legislative assembly composed of all residents above the age of 21, and for an executive council. The community work was organized into 6 departments. This community of equality immediately failed. After 2 weeks of general disorder, Robert Owen was asked to take over. Some who disliked Owen's views on religion never did join the community of equality. Instead, with Owen's blessing, they organized McCluria, a short distance northeast of town. A second group, consisting of English farmers who had come by way of Illinois, broke away to form Phi Beta Phi, about 2 miles to the east. 2 days later, practically the entire boatload of knowledge, led by Robert Dale Owen, William Owen, and Robert Jennings, formed still another community. It collapsed when members would not settle on uncleared land. In May of 1826, Robert Owen authorized several more communities. One of them, the Education Society, composed of intellectuals under McClure's patronage, got possession of the choicest property of the town. Conditions that grew worse during the summer were caricaturized by Cruikshank. In the fall and winter, there were various reorganizations, during which time a rift between McClure and Owen widened. By April of 1827, the Owenite experiments at New Harmony in common property had ended. Robert Owen spent little time in New Harmony after June of that year. He was disappointed that the educational activities under McClure had not amalgamated the community, but he felt he had succeeded in creating a new social environment. In 1828, the 2 agricultural communities disintegrated. A year later, Robert Dale Owen wrote,
New Harmony has been useful both as an example and a beacon. An example to prove how much happiness, social equality, and tolerant principles can produce, and a beacon to warn us against the shoals of imprudence and the breakers of precipitancy.
After leaving New Harmony, Robert Owen went to Mexico, where he sought in vain the administration of the government of Texas according to his principles. Then Owen returned to England to lecture, write, and lead trade union and cooperative movements.
This great revolution in all human affairs can be finally accomplished only through the development of great fundamental truths, declared to the world in the spirit of peace, kindness, and charity, and explained with untiring patience and perseverance by those who have been ennobled to acquire a practical knowledge of human nature and society.
While visiting his birthplace, Robert Owen died. He was 87, and Robert Dale was at his side. There in Newtown, Wales, he was buried. In retrospect, Professor J.F.C. Harrison has written, "The most enduring aspects of a social movement are not always its institutions, but the mental attitudes which inspire it, and which are in turn generated by it." Robert Owen's legacy of mental freedom lived on in New Harmony and elsewhere, after his attempted community organizations there had ended. Educators and scientists from the Boatload of Knowledge and the Children of Robert Owen provided leadership for a golden age of intellectual productivity with nationwide influences. William McClure linked economic equality, education, and liberty in a continuous circle of cause and effect. For adults, McClure organized the Society for Mutual Instruction, out of which grew the Workingmen's Institute, for which he endowed a library that, with further endowments by local benefactors, exists today as a link with the past. McClure's School of Industry printed The Disseminator, its official organ, and also Opinions on Various Subjects, in which McClure asserted that knowledge is power in political societies. The School of Industry also published works of Thomas Say, such as his Conchology. Say, a resident naturalist and teacher, became known as the father of American zoology. Robert Owen's youngest sons, David Dale and Richard, accomplished notable geological research and teaching. David Dale Owen used the old Rampite Granary as his laboratory and museum. It became the headquarters for the first U.S. Geological Survey at the time David Dale was United States geologist. In 1859, he built a new laboratory to house his collection. During his career, he became state geologist for Arkansas, Kentucky, and Indiana. Upon the death of David Dale, Richard Owen succeeded him as Indiana state geologist. During the Civil War, Richard became a colonel in the Union Army. Confederate prisoners who had been under his charge later erected a monument to Richard at the state capitol for his kindness to them. After the war, he became professor of natural science at Indiana University and the first president of Purdue University. Robert Dale carried on his father's tradition as a social reformer. In his younger days, he was associated with Frances Wright in the Neshoba slave liberation community in Tennessee, and with her in editing, writing, and lecturing on free thought in New York City, a period which included the authorship of the first book on birth control printed in America. After returning to New Harmony, Robert Dale began a political career. He served in the Indiana legislature, then in the United States Congress, where he was a chief promoter in establishing the Smithsonian Institution. As an elected member of the state's Second Constitutional Convention, he prepared the final product. He continued his political activities by returning to the Indiana legislature, where his leadership advanced women's rights and free public education. For 6 years, during the 1850s, he was American Chargé d'Affaires and minister in Naples. William Owen, the second of Robert's sons, was a businessman in New Harmony for almost all his relatively brief adult career. His chief cultural interest was the Thespian Society, which he founded. He also acted in many of its presentations. Lesueur designed scenery for early productions. In 1840, the Thespians produced Robert Dale Owen's one dramatic effort, Pocahontas, after its New York run. During the last half of the 19th century, New Harmony's reputation as a theatrical center was enhanced by members of the Golden family, who organized a touring company with New Harmony as its base. The only one of Robert Owen's 3 daughters to come to America was Jane. She married Robert Henry Fauntleroy, a New Harmony physical scientist and astronomer. Robert and Jane Owen Fauntleroy's daughter founded in 1859 the Minerva Society, one of the early women's clubs in America. The tradition of creative concern for the mind, body, and spirit of man is still alive in contemporary New Harmony. The library of the Workingmen's Institute has collections that are especially valuable for local historical research. The Institute also has a museum and an art gallery. Historic properties maintained by the state of Indiana include a museum housed in a building that served the Rappites as a dormitory and the Owenites as a school. The state has also restored Thrall's Opera House, where the University of Evansville presents a summer season of plays, sponsored by Harmony Associates. The Bentel House and the Natural Areas and Historic Trust support educational projects in art, textiles, and crafts. The Robert Lee Blaffer Trust has adapted to modern usage several Harmonist houses and sponsors organized educational programs. A park has been dedicated to the memory of theologian Paul Tillich by the Blaffer Trust, and it has also built an interdenominational roofless church that features contemporary sculpture by Jacques Lipschitz. New Harmony's Renaissance is founded upon its enduring legacies.
Through the development of great fundamental truth, declared to the world in the spirit of peace, kindness, and charity.
The most enduring aspects of a social movement are not always its institutions, but the mental attitudes which inspire it, and which are in turn generated by it.
New Harmony has been useful both as an example and a beacon.